Keith Coburn from Coburn Guidance, and he's going to be talking about how to write a winning CV. And I know over time, the idea of what makes a good CV has changed so much. You ask somebody who's, 5, 6, 7 years longer in the job market, and they'll have different ideas about what it is. So it's really good to keep your CV skills up to date. I guess problems that people have might be things like explaining gaps in CVs, or people telling porky pies, which of course we wouldn't condone at all. Maybe if you think you're overqualified, and there's all sorts of questions. So Keith is going to be our man who's going to answer all those questions. He'll talk for in and around 30 minutes. We'll have a bit of a Q&A session at the end. So if you have any questions, hang on to them until the end, and we'll bombard you then with them. So lovely warm round of applause for Keith today at our Jobs Expo.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. I'm going to dodge this over here. Can everyone hear me this way? So rather than I'm stuck behind this, great. Yeah, it's great. There's a great crowd here of about 1 million people, by the looks of it. So look, I suppose what I'm going to do, and I'll give you a brief outline of my background. I've worked as a career guidance counsellor probably for the last 3 years, since I went back and did a master's in guidance counselling. But prior to that, since 2007, I've worked in the career guidance capacity. So I've worked when things were going well, when things were going bad, and now that things are starting to pick up. So I've worked a full cycle, and I've worked with, I'd say at this stage now, it must be tens of thousands of people. And I've probably done tens of thousands of CVs at this stage. So what I wanted to do was just put together, I suppose, a few tips that would help you get through your CV, because you can have the best interview skills in the world. You can be absolutely fantastic in front of people, but unless you get called for the interview, there's no point in being this absolutely brilliant interviewee. So you have to get called. So the interview is the CV is the absolute necessity to get called. So can I just do a little bit? Can I get a raise of hands of who here is happy with their CV at the moment? That's great, because there was one gentleman that put his hand up and it looked like he was the only person for about 5 seconds. So it's right, okay. Can I get a show of hands then of who enjoys doing up a CV for a job? Perfect, we've 2. Thanks very much, thanks very much. Okay, so look, what I'll do is I'll run through this, I'll go through the steps with you, and if there's any questions at the very end, we'll have a bit of a Q&A. So the first things first, checklist for the interview skills, right? Pen, paper, laptop, your own memory, experience, patience, and job specification. So when I say about your own memory, the reason I say your own memory is because you can come and sit with me as a CV writer and I'll write your CV, but it comes from your memory. So you have to remember that everything that's going to go down on the CV has happened to you. It hasn't happened the person writing it. It hasn't happened a career coach, a guidance counsellor, whatever it is. It's happened to you. So you have to remember these things. The third thing would be experience. So the experience of whether you've worked in an industry for 20 years or whether you're just straight out as a graduate and you haven't worked, everyone has varying degrees of experience. It just might be experience in an internship. It might be part-time experience. It might be full-time experience, anything like that. And then patience. And patience is a big one, because I was talking to somebody recently who said they applied for a job with one of the big supermarkets in Ireland, and they said the amount of stuff I had to do applications, and then I had to fill out like 10 questions, and then I had to do this, that, and the other, and then I had to, oh God. And I said to them, why do you think they wanted to take so long? And they didn't actually have an answer. And I said, well, look, if 100 people want to apply for that job and 100 people start off applying for that job, the chances are, if the application process is tough, that by the end of it, 100 people are not going to apply for that job. 30, 35 people might. The other 50 or 60 might decide this is too much. So an application process, as much as writing a CV, requires patience. And then the last thing, and this is probably, hopefully, by the end of this, we'll be all happy with this, but the job specification. A job specification or a job description is an absolute necessity for if you're applying for a job. If you're applying for a job that does not have a job specification, or if you don't have one in front of you, then it's like wandering around a room in the dark. You don't actually know what you're looking for. So I'll go through the steps with you here, and we can kind of see what I'm talking about in regards to CVs. Now take it, at this stage, I always wanted to be able to get to the point where I could say hundreds of CVs. I got to that, and now I can say tens of thousands of CVs. I've probably seen about 20 already this morning. So, does anybody know this gentleman? Anybody? Yeah, Game of Thrones, perfect. That's George R.R. Williams. So I didn't know how I was going to fit Game of Thrones in, seeing as it's so topical. I didn't know how I was going to fit it into this, but then it dawned on me. George R.R. Williams writes sci-fi novels. He's wrote about 6 or 7 of them to date, okay? Your CV is everything that George R.R. Williams' Game of Thrones is not. Your CV is not based on sci-fi. Your CV is based on truth. Your CV is not going to be 6 or 7 books or novels. Your CV is going to be, on average, 2 pages at an absolute max. If you find that you at the moment have a CV that's 4 or 5 pages, do me a favor. I always ask people to go through the jobs that they've done and actually identify the ones that are more specific to the area that you're going for. And a perfect example of this would be a lot of the workshops that I would engage with. I would get people to write up job specifications. So I get them to be the employers. So I tell them, you're a hotel owner, put together a job description for a receptionist or for an IT or whatever it is. And at the end of it, when they've put together the whole thing, I then put about 50 CVs in front of them. And I asked them, of those 50 CVs, tell me what you're looking for now. And every single time, what they're looking for now is a CV that is to the point, it hits what's on the job spec, and it's not something that they have to read for the next half an hour. So the next time you're doing your CV, think of George R. Williams, all right? Your CV, 2 pages max. If it goes to 2.5, that's okay, but 2 pages ideally. No sci-fi, no dragons, no lies. Everything that you have to write on it has to be of truth, okay? So, that's my first tip. The second tip would be excellent attention to detail. And what I mean by excellent attention to detail is, if you have down on your personal profile, or if you respond to a job that says excellent attention to detail, and if you make a mistake, or if there's loads of spelling mistakes on your CV, then straight away you've highlighted to the employer that first of all, you haven't read the job spec, and second of all, you don't have excellent attention to detail. And when I was thinking about this, and I was thinking about how could I actually get the crowd to understand how excellent attention to detail matters, I suppose there was only one thing that popped into my head. And it was a tweet that we all probably know. So that's Donald Trump, as we all know. So Donald Trump sent out this tweet, was it 2 years ago? And what he meant to say was press conference. But being the President of the United States, you don't have to proofread your own tweets, so you can just send it out. So you can imagine if Donald Trump was applying for a job, or will be applying for a job, if he was to have spelling mistakes on his CV, straight away, it gives out the impression that A, you either haven't taken it seriously, B, you haven't read the job spec, or C, you don't have attention to detail that they actually want. So always remember that attention to detail is going to be one of the big things, especially if it's highlighted on the job spec. So now that you now know, 2 pages max, everything has to be truthful, attention to detail. Let me show you one thing. Actually, yeah, let me show you the first thing. So have your personal details at the top of a CV, right? So this is very, very straightforward. And I see it so many times where people will, I don't know, they might, what's the word? Throw everything down on a CV. It's probably not a word, it's a sentence more so. So all I want you to do with your CVs, and this is coming from industry as well. When I was working with one of the organizations, I would have worked very closely with Intel, and I did up CVs for individuals who were going for Intel. So I would have worked very closely with Intel, asking them, what do you want on a CV? What types of things do you not want to see? What do you want to see? So name, address, mobile number, email address. Very, very straightforward. You don't need to give any other details bar that. Now, can I suggest for mobile numbers, if you have a mobile number that you have given, please have a voicemail set up. If you don't have a voicemail set up, have one that is, first of all, appropriate. because I've seen and heard some unbelievable voicemails. Anyway, but have a voicemail set up properly, okay? Because if an employer rings you, and if you can't answer that phone, they might be ringing you from a private number, or they might be ringing you from a Dublin number, which is their mainland office. If you give a phone number that doesn't have a voicemail and they ring you, they don't have any way of leaving you a message. So how unprofessional would it then feel that you have to pick up the phone, ring back that number and say, sorry, I had a missed call from me, I don't know who it was, I don't know what it was about, yeah, that's about it. So have a voicemail. If you have a voicemail set up, you're able to stay on top of these things if you don't like answering private numbers. And a lot of people don't like answering private numbers because they think it might be somebody offering them 5 million or something like that, but I don't know. So if that's ever happened to you, by the way, good. So the things you don't include, right? So do not include these. You don't have to include your date of birth. You don't have to include your gender, your PPS number, your marital status, your nationality, or your health status. They're all grounds for discrimination, right? An employer does not want to see your age. They do not want to see your nationality. And the reason being is because they don't want somebody ringing Joe Duffy on a Monday morning going, Joe, I didn't get called for the interview because I'm 62. And they know I'm 62 because I wrote it on my CV. So they don't want to see any of those on your CV, okay? The chances are, with your date of birth, if you've worked in an industry for 20, 30 years, they're going to know that you're not 18, 19 years old. The chances are that if you put down that you have 5 or 6 languages, and maybe Lithuanian would be the main language that you've put down, they're going to know that you're probably from Lithuania, or whatever the countries that you're referencing are. So you don't have to write down those. Health status, nationality. I've seen some really tricky CVs where somebody has wrote down health status, I'm fine. I genuinely have seen that. I wouldn't lie. I wouldn't actually make it up. I'm fine. You don't need to write down I'm fine on a job CV. So your personal details are your name, address, telephone number, email address. They're the main points. This is going to be your best friend for the rest of this presentation. This is a job spec that I pulled yesterday, and I just wanted to put up because I thought rather than talking about a CV, I'd rather talk about a CV that's relevant to a particular job spec. So this is a job spec that I pulled up yesterday. So you can see yourself serving customers on the trade counter, where we internal sales, answering the telephone, preparing customer quotations, purchase ordering, supplier negotiation, customer order picking, all of those. So they're the responsibilities that you're going to be asked to do in a job. So that's the employer telling you, that's what I want you to do. What's desirable but not essential then? Good working knowledge of computers and Microsoft Office, valid manual handling course, forklift license, and then previous experience in a warehouse. So that's the job spec we're now going to use for the rest of our CV. Everyone comfortable with that? Yeah, great. Perfect. So, the person profile example, right? The way that we do it is name, address, telephone number, email address, and underneath that we have a personal profile. And the personal profile, with anyone that's come out to me as a career coach outside will know, a personal profile is basically a synopsis of who you are and how you match the job that you're actually going for. So a personal profile for every person in this room is going to be absolutely different. And you've probably seen the generic ones of, I'm a motivated, punctual individual. Has everyone seen that sort of stuff? That just means I'm never going to be late and I'm never going to be lazy. An employer doesn't want motivated, or an employer doesn't want punctual, honest, hardworking. They're all words that, let's be honest, we all kind of throw out just willy-nilly. So what I want you to do is to start looking at a personal profile and actually making sense of what the job specification said and what your background is. So for this, what I decided was to use my experience. So years and years and years ago, before I got into career guidance, I worked in bars, and I worked in bar work for probably about 5-6 years. So what I'm going to show you is how you transfer skills from a different industry into a different industry, okay? But that's what it's called is transferable skills. So you're taking what you've done in one job and you're bringing it across into another job. So, person profile. Right, a highly motivated and enthusiastic individual with a background in the customer service sector has demonstrated excellent customer service skills, especially during busy and demanding periods. a proven ability at working on their own and also as part of a team. So straight away, if this CV was to go to an employer, I know that I could actually stand over that. I've had in the past people who have worked in an industry for maybe 1 year who will write down on their personal profile a highly experienced with 1 year. And what will happen is, that's brilliant, they may feel fantastic about it, but when they get called, if they get called to an interview, an interviewer will say, I see on the CV you have your highly experienced 1 year. And it can at times lead to problems where an interviewer may see that highly experienced is not 1 year. So try to get your personal profile as close to you as possible and also matching the job that you're going for. Because if you don't, and I always say to everyone, like if you look at, let's say if a personal profile of a nurse, if somebody here was a nurse and they were doing a personal profile, I'm only speaking because a lot of my family would have done nursing, you know, patient, caring, problem solving, excellent communicator. Those skills, if you were to pick a different job, you would be able to transfer them across. So it's all about being able to see where your skills lie and put them onto a CV. So outside of that, what next? Okay, so now that we have your name, address, telephone number and email address, and we have your personal profile, and your personal profile is reflective of you as an individual and also the job you're going for, we're now going to put in two things, but we're going to change them depending on where your experience lies. So if this is a role you've previously done, you'd put work experience first. So if you have worked in banking for 10 years, put in banking first. You put in your work experience first and you talk about banking. However, if this isn't a role you've had before, but you have the education and training, then you put the education and training in first. And a prime example would be in 2009, 2010, when things in Ireland had got tough and when people went back to reskill. What happened was people were applying for jobs, let's say in social care, but for 15 years they might have worked in construction, right? So they had gone back and reskilled. So what I was telling people to do was put your education and training first, because on average, a CV is in an employer's hands for 10 to 15 seconds on the first draft. If they see on your first page of your CV, you've gone for a social care role, and they see that you've spent 15 years in construction, they might not have the time or patience to put 2 and 2 together to read on. So what you need to do is get them right from the start. So the first thing they see is a personal profile that says a caring individual who recently qualified as a social care worker, now looking to use their skills in this environment. And then when they move down underneath it, under education, they see social care, QQI level 6, Dublin Business School, rather than construction, laying bricks. And they're going, what has that got to do with social care unless I've been grossly misinformed by social care? So every time you do a CV, it's going to be different, all right? So I'll give you an example. So I used me working in a bar. I picked out me working in a bar to demonstrate that I was going to go for this electrical role. Because remember this electrical role I showed you? That one? Perfect. So we're now going to apply for that, but we're going to change my skills. So I worked in a bar. So I'm not going to say changed kegs. There's no need for me to say changed kegs, because if you read that, there is no thing that says changed kegs. So why would I reference it? So what we're going to do is lay out your employment in a clear and precise manner, and do me a favor, put it in bullet points. Sometimes what happens is people put their CVs and their duties and they put it in a paragraph. Remember, an employer has 10-15 seconds on the first glimpse. If it's in a paragraph, then you've reverted back to George R.R. Martin. Remember what we said at the start? No George R.R. Martin, right? This is not Game of Thrones. So bullet points. So we're going to do it like this. So bar assistant, Jory's Hotel, Main Street. I'm fairly sure that's not an actual street in Dublin, Main Street. So what I said was, serving customers in a timely and efficient manner throughout the working shift also entailed answering the telephone regarding bookings and events. Now, if you remember the job spec, in the job spec, they made reference to answering the telephone. So I've hit on that. Having an understanding of the food and drinks menu, along with being able to offer suggestions when asked. Perfect, because in the job spec, they talked about product knowledge. I'm now showing I have product knowledge. Responsible for the ordering of stock for the bar, included stock ordering and then linking it with suppliers around best pricing. great because in the job they asked about best pricing. They actually said must have experience of best pricing. And the last part, working with the stockroom during delivery periods, would do this to ensure delivery went smoothly and bars stocked fully. So again, that's something that they asked for on the job spec. So I've taken out the parts of the job that I've done and I've made reference to the job I'm going for. And this is where people make a really, really, really common mistake. Remember, when you're doing a CV, you're not talking about the job you're in. You're talking about the job you're going for. If I was to take talking about bar work, I would tell you all day long about bar work, but I'll be guaranteed you one thing, I won't be getting a job with DID Electrical, because DID Electrical won't see any relevance to why I'm talking about changing kegs. But what you have to do is you have to find transferable skills within the job that you've done and match them to what the job spec is saying. And what we tend to do, and I've seen this across 12, 13 years, what we tend to do is we read a job spec and we then say, I've never done any of that. And I always say to somebody, have another look, think about it. And when a second or third attempt, when somebody looks at it, they actually make out, actually, you know what, I have done that. I have done payroll, or I have worked as part of a team. So just be prepared to think a little bit about what you've done. So again, employment, the way with employment, chronological. So your most recent on top and work your way down, okay? So that's under your personal profile. Don't do general admin duties. Do not write in general admin duties. General admin duties to me might be that you shredded paper. General admin duties to you might be that you were in charge of payroll, annual leave, all HR matters, everything. So don't sell yourself short. Actually read out or write out what you did. Don't start kind of giving 3-4 answers or 3-4 word answers. So after that, so once the employment part is out of the way, you're going to do education and training. So again, you can probably see with the alignment, I'm a big fan of having everything aligned down the way that it should be. So I've done business through computers, right? And I've done QQI level 5, Dublin City College. Do you see the way I've done modules included? If I hadn't done modules included, would anybody be able to tell me here, does business through computers in Dublin City College, which we know doesn't exist, but does that in any way have payroll, manual and computerized? No, you wouldn't, is the answer. You wouldn't be able to tell me that. So by writing out the modules, I've showed the employer the exact stuff I've done. An employer isn't going to take the time and go on to Google and go, right, business through computers. I like the sound of this client, but I just want to see if they've done payroll. So I'm going to Google it and then I'll tell them. So what I want you to do is write down the actual modules that you've done on the course, but write down the modules that are relevant to the job you're going for. Because if they've asked for manual or payroll, if they've asked for payroll or manual and computerized on your job spec, and you've done it, and you don't make references to it on your CV, then it only means one thing: you didn't do it. If it's not on the CV, you didn't do it. And anyone that would say to me, I'm happy with my CV, the only reason you can be happy with your CV is if it's getting you called for interviews. If your CV is not getting you called for interviews, then don't be happy with it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that in a, isn't it great you know where the problem is and we can try fix it. And I always say to people, if you go for 10 interviews and you don't get any of the interviews, then that means there's a problem with your interview skills. If you go for 10 jobs and you send in your CV and you don't get called to any of them, then that means there's a problem with your CV. So it's about finding out where the problem is, and when you know what the problem is, you can try and get the answer. So I'm nearly there. So interests and achievements, right? This shows that you have other interests outside of working life. So write in what you enjoy doing, right? It used to be interests and hobbies, but I don't like the term interests and hobbies, because interests and hobbies to me sounds like the exact same thing. And a perfect example would be a young gentleman that I was working with in Dublin who wrote down his interests and achievements as boxing. And I asked him, boxing, really, you watch it, do you? And he was like, nope, I have an under 17, an under 18 and an under 19 Irish title. And I kind of looked at him as if to say, and you just have the word boxing down. That's it. And he couldn't see the relevance of why an employer would love somebody who's won medals in a sport. Well, it shows dedication, motivation, all those types of things. So he can clearly put that on his personal profile. He can put down on his personal profile that he's focus driven, Because if they ask him in an interview, how are you focus driven, he's able to say, well, you'd notice from my CV that I've won under 17, under 18, 19. If he had down on his CV he's focus driven and he's never driven or been focused ever in his entire life, then the interview is over, because everything that they will, from then on, they will question that's on his CV. So that's the interest and achievements. Try, if possible, to make them relevant to the role you're applying for, right? So if you're going to be doing anything in sports or nutrition, you could write down that you enjoy walking, you enjoy jogging, whatever it be, but just try and make interest and achievements as relevant to the job as you possibly can. And that's the best way to look at it. And then the last part, references available upon request, right? Please write references available upon request. Don't write down 2 people's names and their addresses and their telephone numbers. Because what will happen is, you might have asked them 6 months ago, can I use you as a reference? And they said, yeah, absolutely can. And you get offered a job. And the person rings that person, let's say Siobhan, and they say, Siobhan, hi, I'm ringing about Keith. We're about to offer him a job. And Siobhan hasn't spoke to you in about a year or 6 months. And Siobhan is going, who? Your man, yeah, I think, and she gets you confused with someone else to go, yeah, he robbed from us. That's why we got rid of him. So if you do references available upon request, you're actually able to, they will ask you, they will say, can we have 2 references? And say to them, yeah, I'll give me 2 hours and I'll get you 2 references. But then you can ring your references and prime them and tell them, look, this is what it is. This I've been called for, or I've been offered a job. This is what it's going to be. But don't write references. Don't write the references on your CV, because they may go ahead and just ring the person, and you haven't prepped them, which will be very, very, very unfortunate. Okay, so the last part, or the very last slide, is tell a lie once, and all your truths become questionable. And what I mean by that, it's fairly self-explanatory, but what I mean by that is, if you put down on your CV, and this has happened to me so many times, and the answer will always be the same. I will get somebody who said to me, I wrote down something on my CV that wasn't true, and I get interviews, nearly boasting. And I will always say, that's fantastic, fair play to you, lying on your CV. Great, did you get the job? Oh no, I didn't get the job. The reason they didn't get the job was because when they sat there in front of the person, and the person went, I see on your CV you have that you were kayaking champion in Ireland for the last 5 years. Was I? And straight away, they've told a lie once, and everything becomes questionable. And what's not on the slide, and I want you, if you don't take any, hopefully you take more than anything from this. What I want you to take from this more than anything is, if you apply for a job with your CV and you don't get called for the interview, do me a favor, just send them an email or ring them. The worst they will say is no. All you're doing is ringing and asking, look, I applied for a job most recently. Unfortunately, I wasn't shortlisted. I respect that, but this is an area I'd love to work in, so I just would love some feedback about how I can improve things. The worst they will say is no. The best they will say is, yes, we want somebody with a supervisory management QQI level 6 course, and you don't have that. And it always amazes me, both for CVs and interviews, that we don't do this. I got my car recently NCT'd. It failed. The first question I asked was, what did it fail on? So we'll do that for a car with an NCT, but we won't do that when it comes to applying for a job ourselves. So I want you to get into the practice of asking, why did I fail and what could I do better next time? Because otherwise, if you don't, your CV is just going to come in a vicious link of you're sending the same type of CV out, and you won't find out what is actually the missing link and what's probably going to get you into the job. So on that bombshell, I'm finished, and I never thought I'd get to say this, but I'm going to hand you over to Ruth Scott.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amelia.
It's quite the packed house you have here. In terms of interests and achievements, I was wondering could I put down my junior C hockey runners-up from my secondary school days, but I probably need to work harder than that. Any questions from the audience at this stage? First hand I see up here.
Thanks very much for that. Just a quick one. If you have a job that it's not going to help you, didn't do any good, you're only there for a few months, is it a good thing to take it off the CV if it's not going to help you, or you feel it's not going to help you in a situation?
Yeah, just that, is the job relevant to the job you're going for?
No.
Okay. what I would say to that is, it's very much, personally, I don't like gaps on CVs that can't be answered. No. So if it's a 5-6 month gap, I would put it in personally. And you don't even have to go into the duties, but you can have it in. Because if there is a 5 or 6 month gap, especially like I would see CVs where it might be 2004, 2005, which would have been very high employment, and somebody might have done something for 6 months and then not put it in, and I might say, well, look, I think you're better off putting it in. But it depends on your CV. Do you know, if you have a lot of work experience, then yeah, it's up to yourself. But personally, as a CV writer and having done it for years and years and years, I would always be saying, as much as possible, fill up the blanks. You don't have to go into loads of duties, but just even get it down on it.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Thanks.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Like,
There's
a hand right behind me.
Three.
Thank you. In terms of putting down proficient or working knowledge of skill, like because you're applying for a job, you don't know what they look upon as proficient or working knowledge.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you don't want to overstate yourself either.
Yeah, absolutely. But like look, if you can use Microsoft Word and you can use Microsoft PowerPoint, I would put down proficient. Do you know, it's not up to you to put down, I'm kind of good at Microsoft Word. I think I'm a good bit, you know, I kind of know PowerPoint. So I would put down proficient. Like, proficient means that you have a working knowledge of it and you're able to use it. So I'm not going to put down, I'm proficient in Excel. Don't ask me how it works, but I'm proficient in it. So yeah, I would. And even under personal profile, what you could do is under personal profile, before your employment, you could write down key skills and write down your key skills, like you were saying, that, you know, proficient in Microsoft Word, proficient in Excel, stuff like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. I feel like a politician. This is great.
If you're on the disability spectrum, how should you tackle that in the thing, like in terms of disclosure? How do you deal with that on the topic? Because I know with in terms of companies employing now, there's like two levels. In terms of companies employing now, there's definitely kind of a move towards employing like inclusivity and stuff, but then how would you deal with that on the CV itself?
Yeah.
So.
Perfect. Okay, so I'll answer that in two ways. So the first way is I would have worked with employability before. Employability are across the country, and employability work with people who are in receipt of disability benefit or disability allowance. So they would work with people and they would bridge that gap. So they would go into an employer and say, look, I've got an absolutely fantastic person here. They would disclose what it could be, anything from a back injury to whatever other type of disability. Disability is such a broad statement. If it's not going to impact you in your workplace, then there's no point. Like, if you're going to work on a construction site and you have a bad back, I would be, because the chances are that's going to impact on your life. But if it's something that, like, I would see some people who would be on the autistic spectrum and they are fantastic in certain areas of work, that's not a disability because it's an area that they really enjoy, and that it's an area that, just like anyone else, they would be as hard working. So I suppose to answer that, only if it's really going to impact you. There's no law that you have to, but only if it's going to impact you in the workplace.
Okay.
I think there was one lady.
This is going to have to be the last question because we're desperately over time.
Sorry.
Hi Keith, thanks so much for your presentation. I just have a question about, I don't need to get so personal, but I have a year's gap in my CV because I had to take a caring role in my family due to someone's chronic illness, and I'm having difficulty explaining the gap in interviews.
Perfect. I was hoping somebody was going to bring something like that up, and then I was like, how do I bring it back up without, because we're over time. Perfect. You treat that like a job. And I know it wasn't a job because you were looking after a loved one, so I know it wasn't a job. But treat it like a job on your work experience. So you write down full-time care, and you write down the dates that you did it, and you write down the duty, looking and caring after a loved one. Until the day robots rule the world, which hopefully never happens, human emotion is going to take a part. So if you have down that you were looking after a loved one on your CV, there is no gap. There is no gap. And it's the same time if you were a full-time parent. You write down full-time parent, the years. That's not a gap from what I can gather. That's not a gap. But all they want to see is that, I suppose, if it's a year, that you haven't just for the year not been doing anything. If there's a course in there, fantastic. But like that, you were saying you were care for a loved one, then you write down, just like I did there, you write down full-time care, and you write down 1 or 2 of the duties that you were doing. And that's a job.
It's really good.
That helps. Thanks.
Hopefully you find that useful. Listen, now, unfortunately we have to call it quits at this stage. I suspect we could be here all afternoon throwing questions at Keith Coburn, but I'd love to give him a round of applause. Thank you so much, Keith.
Very much.
You have a stand outside as well, I suspect. Okay.
I'm here for the next hour.
He's there for the next hour. So quick, everybody run out and grab him there. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a break, and our next speaker is on stage in less than 10 minutes' time. Thank you.